Ambergris Caye, Belize, November 11th, 2012. An island so small you can drive across it in 20 minutes. 11,000 people, tourists, expats, fishermen. The kind of place people move to when they want the world to forget they exist. That morning, a housekeeper pushes open the door of a seafront villa and stops walking. Gregory Fall is face up on the floor. One bullet, back of the skull, 9mm, execution style. His laptop is gone. His phone is gone. The room is otherwise completely untouched. By noon, police have a suspect. Not a cartel hitman, not a local criminal, a 70-year-old American millionaire, the man who invented the software protecting half the world's computers. By the time officers arrive at his compound 50 yards down the beach, the gate is standing open and the house is empty. John McAfee is already gone. What follows is not a chase. Chases end quickly. What follows is 18 months of one man making 3 governments, Interpol, and the full intelligence apparatus of the United States look like they are searching for a ghost that doesn't want to be found. He fakes his death. He fakes 2 heart attacks. He bribes his way out of a deportation cell hours before extradition. He taunts the FBI on Twitter with coordinates they arrive at too late. Every single time they get close, the room is already empty. But here is what makes this insane. This is not the story of a man who got lucky. This is the story of a man who spent 40 years building a mind that could not be contained, and who finally, at the end of his life, pointed that mind directly at the people trying to cage him. To understand what John McAfee was capable of, you have to understand what he built. 1987, Silicon Valley. The personal computer is new enough that most people still don't trust it. IBM machines are showing up in offices, in universities, in living rooms, and with them, something nobody planned for, the brain virus. A Pakistani-written piece of code spreading through floppy disks like a biological infection. Silent, invisible, destructive. John McAfee is 32 years old, working as a programmer at Lockheed. He watches the panic spread and sees 2 things at once: a problem nobody has solved and a market nobody has entered. He writes a detection program in his spare time. 12 lines of code. He calls it virus scan. Within weeks, corporate IT departments are calling him directly. Within months, he quits Lockheed. McAfee Associates is born from the trunk of a car in a Silicon Valley parking lot. Most people in his position would have hired a marketing team and built something conventional. John does the opposite. In 1989, he gives an interview warning that computer viruses will cause companies to collapse from financial loss. He amplifies terror with surgical precision, not lying exactly. Just describing the worst possible outcome with enough conviction that every IT manager who hears it immediately reaches for his phone. It works. By 1990, half the Fortune 100 is paying for McAfee antivirus. Revenue hits $5 million annually, then doubles again. John McAfee becomes Silicon Valley royalty, the man who tamed the digital wilderness. He hates every second of it. Board meetings, quarterly earnings calls, shareholders, regulators, lawyers, 1,000 people with 1,000 opinions about how his company should operate. This is a man who got expelled from a doctoral program for sleeping with a professor's daughter, who got fired from an engineering job for showing up under the influence of hallucinogens, who once hid behind a dumpster in a drug-induced fugue state and found it, somehow, clarifying. Corporate life isn't just boring him, it is suffocating him. In 1993, he cashes out, sells his shares for $100 million, and walks away from the company that still carries his name. He is 48 years old. He is free, and he has absolutely no idea what to do with himself. For a while, he drifts. Yoga retreats in New Mexico, ultralight aircraft over the Sonoran Desert, books on Eastern mysticism that he reads twice and then abandons. None of it fills the thing that's been emptied. Because John McAfee is not a man built for stillness. He is a man built for opposition, for the gap between what exists and what he thinks should exist. And without that gap to operate in, he is nothing. Then 2008 arrives and solves that problem for him. The financial crash takes his net worth from 9 figures to approximately $4 million. 96% of everything he'd built, gone. Most people would experience this as catastrophe. John experiences it as confirmation. Everything he'd suspected about institutions, about governments, about the systems human beings build to extract value from other human beings while pretending to protect them. The crash proves it. The state is a parasite. The market is a rigged game. The only rational response is to remove yourself from both. In 2009, he buys a plane ticket to Belize. No extradition treaty with the United States. No meaningful IRS reach. No rules that can't be navigated around or purchased away. He brings money, ambition, and the absolute conviction that he can build something new. He buys a beachside villa on Ambergris Cay, then a jungle compound near Orange Walk in the interior. He hires bodyguards, ex-convicts, men who understand that their loyalty is being purchased rather than earned, which in John's view makes it more honest than most loyalty. He establishes a pharmaceutical research operation, claiming he's developing herbal antibiotics from jungle plants, that he's going to solve superbugs with compounds the pharmaceutical industry has ignored because they can't be patented. By day, he pilots his ultralight plane over the reef. By night, he throws parties that the neighbors describe with visible discomfort. Automatic weapons displayed alongside the drinks. Bonfires that burn until 4 in the morning. To the expat community on Ambergris Cay, he is either fascinating or terrifying, sometimes both on the same afternoon. But he is, for the first time in years, completely alive. What nobody on the island fully understands yet is that the same psychological architecture that made him a genius in Silicon Valley, the paranoia, the pattern recognition, the absolute certainty that he can see threats others cannot, has been running without the stabilizing friction of institutional life for too long. In the silence of the jungle, those qualities are beginning to turn inward. He starts picking fights. With local gangsters over territory he decides is his. With government officials who take an interest in his research. With neighbors over noise and dogs and the 1,000 small frictions of living close to someone who operates by his own code. Belize, he will learn, is not a place where foreign millionaires get to write their own laws. And by April 2012, the Belizean government has decided to demonstrate exactly that. April 30th, 2012. Before dawn. The gang suppression unit arrives at McAfee's compound with the quiet efficiency of people who have done this before. No warrant is shown. Officers in tactical gear move through the gate and across the yard. McAfee, his girlfriend, and his staff are lined up against a wall at gunpoint before most of them are fully awake. His dogs charge. 4 mastiffs, bred for exactly this kind of confrontation, cross the yard toward the intruders. An officer raises a shotgun. One blast drops the first animal mid-stride. Another shot. Another dog down. McAfee is screaming, trying to move toward them, being held back by 2 officers, watching his animals die in the dirt while men with guns go through everything he owns. They search for 6 hours. They overturn lab equipment. They confiscate rifles, pistols, chemicals McAfee insists are antibiotic compounds. At the end of 6 hours, they have found 0 drugs. The only charge is an unlicensed firearm, a paperwork violation. They take him to Belize City anyway, to the holding facility locals call the Piss House, named for the open sewer running through it. He spends one night bribing a guard with $100 for a cigarette and using a garbage bag as a belt because they took the real one. He is released the next morning, no charges filed, but something has broken that cannot be repaired. John McAfee returns to his compound with a Glock under his pillow and tripwires around the perimeter. He tells visitors about assassination plots, about corrupt police working with cartels, about the government's systematic campaign to remove him before he can expose what's really happening. Belize's prime minister will later describe him as extremely paranoid, possibly dangerous. John wears both descriptors like medals. 50 yards down the beach, Gregory Fall is watching all of this and reaching a different conclusion. Fall is 52. He moved from Florida to Ambergris Caye for exactly the reasons most people do. Quiet, sun, the sense that the world has been left behind. Instead, he has McAfee's 9 dogs roaming the beach at night, barking continuously, occasionally biting tourists who report the incidents to the local mayor. Fall files the complaints officially. Then he confronts McAfee directly. "Control your dogs, or I'll handle it myself." McAfee refuses. The dogs are security. The conversation ends without resolution, and the tension sits between the two properties like a held breath. November 9th, 2012. McAfee's dogs begin foaming at the mouth. One by one, 4 of them collapse, convulsing. By morning, they're dead, poisoned. McAfee orders his staff to put the surviving animals down to end the suffering. Then he paces the compound with a pistol in his hand, trying to decide which of his enemies sent the message. 24 hours later, one shot echoes across Ambergris Caye in the darkness. Neighbors hear it. Most assume it's a backfiring engine or a firecracker and return to sleep. The next morning, November 11th, Fall's housekeeper finds him on the villa floor. 1 bullet, back of the head, laptop missing, phone missing, nothing else disturbed. When police arrive at McAfee's compound at noon, the gate is standing open. The house is empty. John had seen them coming and was already underground. Literally. A neighbor, years later, will describe watching him bury himself in sand up to his neck in the backyard, a breathing tube in his mouth, watching police search the property through the vegetation while lying completely still 3 feet below the surface. Whether this is exactly what happened, or whether it's the beginning of the mythology he was already constructing around his own disappearance, it doesn't matter. The result is the same. John McAfee is gone, and the most wanted man in Central America is just getting started. He doesn't run blind, and he doesn't run panicked. He had been mapping this contingency for months, perhaps longer, building a network of contacts and safe houses through Belize's interior with the same systematic rigor he once applied to building antivirus software, sympathetic locals, abandoned structures, fishermen who ask no questions because cash asks no questions back. Within 6 hours of going underground, he and Samantha, his girlfriend, are moving through the Belizean interior on a route that police helicopters and roadblocks cannot intercept because it doesn't follow any road. 3 days, concrete rooms, canned food, the sound of helicopters in the distance getting closer, then farther, then gone, On the third day, holed up in a bunker while a search unit sweeps 200 yards away, John finds a small television with a functioning antenna and tunes into the 1960 film Swiss Family Robinson. He sits eating canned beans, watching a fictional family build a life in the wilderness from pure ingenuity, and laughs until his ribs hurt. "Maybe I should build a treehouse," he tells Samantha. But he knows what the timer is. Every hour in Belize tightens the net. Informants are talking. Money is changing hands. Borders are locked. He needs an exit, and he needs it before the window closes. November 14th, 3 days after Fall's murder. Under full darkness, McAfee and Samantha board a small fishing vessel on Belize's southern coast. $2,000 cash for an illegal crossing into Guatemala. No stamps, no records. The boat cuts its engine a mile from shore and drifts across the territorial line in silence. At 3 a.m, they wade ashore near Puerto Barrios, walk into the tree line, and disappear. By sunrise, they are in Guatemala City, checked into the Villa Real Hotel under false names. For the first time in 72 hours, John McAfee exhales. Then he makes the first critical error of the entire operation. With Fall's murder dominating international headlines, with his name being spoken on news programs in 6 languages, John decides he should be the one controlling the narrative. He contacts Vice magazine through encrypted channels, exclusive access to the world's most wanted antivirus mogul. The editor flies to Guatemala personally. A photographer comes with him. They spend 2 days with John, who is gregarious and sharp and performing at full capacity, arm around the journalist's shoulder, grinning through a 3-week beard. The article goes live. We've made it to safety. Photos attached. Within hours, a hacker posts a single tweet directed at McAfee. "John, check your photos. EXIF data. Every photograph taken by a modern digital camera contains embedded metadata. GPS coordinates recorded at the moment the shutter closes." The photographer had not disabled this function. The pictures Vice published contained the exact location of the hotel down to a 20-meter radius. Every intelligence service, every police force, every agency that had been searching for John McAfee for 3 weeks now had his address. December 5th, 24 days after Fall's murder. Guatemalan police storm the Villa Real in the early morning. McAfee is in the lobby speaking with his lawyers when the officers come through the door. He has perhaps 4 seconds of warning before the handcuffs close. The charge is illegal entry. The consequence is deportation to Belize within 48 hours. For John, deportation to Belize is not a legal inconvenience. It is, in his calculation, a death sentence. He has less than 48 hours to prevent this from happening. December 6th, 24 hours after his arrest. McAfee collapses to the floor of his detention cell, clutching his chest. The guards find him pale, barely conscious. An ambulance arrives. He is rushed to a Guatemala City hospital. Monitors are attached. Oxygen tubes placed. News breaks across the wire within the hour. John McAfee has suffered cardiac arrest in Guatemalan custody. The Guatemalan government, suddenly staring at an international incident they did not ask for, pauses the deportation order. Reporters swarm the hospital. John lies on the gurney, oxygen tubes in place, expression arranged into something between suffering and dignity. He holds the performance for 36 hours. Then the doctors announce their findings. No cardiac damage detected. Slightly elevated blood pressure. Nothing clinically significant. John, from his hospital bed, smiles at the cameras. He later explains exactly what he did. hyperventilation followed by controlled breath holding. The oxygen deprivation spikes blood pressure and heart rate readings into ranges that appear alarming on monitors. Sell the performance with enough conviction and the machines do the rest. He had been practicing it for years, he says, not specifically for this moment, just generally. Because you never know. The stunt bought his lawyers enough time to file emergency appeals, to force the Guatemalan bureaucracy into a decision it was not prepared for. Guatemala, faced with the choice between an international incident and a legal technicality, chooses the technicality. John McAfee entered Guatemala illegally from Belize. His country of origin is the United States. He can be repatriated there. John McAfee just checkmated a sovereign nation with a performance he'd been preparing without knowing it for most of his adult life. December 12, 2012, Miami International Airport. John McAfee walks off a commercial flight looking exactly like what he is, a 70-year-old man who has not slept properly in a month, who has been through 2 countries in 3 weeks, who has buried himself in sand, bribed guards, faked cardiac events, and outrun an Interpol alert. He is also grinning. Federal agents question him for approximately 40 minutes. There are no U.S. charges pending. They have nothing to hold him on. They release him into the Florida afternoon, and he walks out through the arrivals terminal and into the sunlight with cameras tracking every step. "It's good to be home," he says. He means it as a joke. He means it as a statement. He means it as a challenge to anyone listening. But the country he came home to is already building its own case. John McAfee hasn't filed a tax return since 2010, hasn't paid $1 to the IRS in years. Taxation is theft, he tells interviewers. The IRS is a criminal organization. He says it smiling, the smile of a man who has thought about this more than the person asking. He has calculated that the IRS will eventually catch up with him. He has calculated roughly when, and he has decided he will not be present when they do. January 2019, a federal grand jury in Tennessee returns an indictment. 8 counts: tax evasion, failure to file, willful evasion. The potential sentence, given his age, is effectively life. Someone tips him off. John McAfee fires up his yacht's engines and disappears into the Caribbean. The tweet goes out 48 hours later. A photo of himself on deck, rifle visible, ocean behind him. Today, I left the United States. I am freer than I have ever been. What begins next is 18 months of maritime evasion that intelligence professionals will later describe, privately and with a certain grudging respect, as genuinely difficult to coordinate against. John moves by sea, Cuba, Dominican Republic, the Bahamas, possibly Venezuela, though he never confirms it. He changes harbors every few days, leaves no consistent pattern, pays for everything in cash or cryptocurrency through layers of wallets that are functionally untraceable. He uses encrypted phones, VPNs. He claims to employ body doubles, posts photos beside people who look enough like him from a distance to create uncertainty. He gives live interviews from rooms he describes only as somewhere you're not looking. He dares the IRS, on the public record, to come find him. In a paradox he understands better than anyone. His fame is his protection. A quiet arrest requires quiet. John McAfee makes quiet impossible. If you want to take him without it becoming a global media event, you first have to find him in a context where cameras aren't already present, and he ensures that context never exists. July 24, 2019, Puerto Plata, Dominican Republic. His yacht docks for fuel and resupply. Local authorities, acting on an Interpol alert, board the vessel within 2 hours. 4 shotguns, 3 handguns. enough ammunition to supply a small team for an extended operation. John, Janice, and the crew are detained. After 4 days of negotiations that likely involve the transfer of funds in amounts nobody will confirm publicly, the Dominican Republic releases them all without charges. John raises a glass of rum from the deck as the yacht leaves the harbor. "Even when they catch me," he says, "they let me go." By late 2019, the operating environment is contracting. By 2020, whether it's the COVID travel restrictions limiting his mobility, whether it's exhaustion, whether it's the beginning of a calculation that the running is done, John McAfee and Janice rent an apartment near Barcelona, Spain. He goes out rarely. He seems, for the first time in years, to be settling. October 5th, 2020. He heads to El Prat Airport, reportedly bound for Istanbul. At the check-in counter, a passport scan takes 3 seconds to return a result. Spanish National Police are surrounding him before he reaches the gate. After years of open water and satellite phones and governments that decided the paperwork wasn't worth it, John McAfee is arrested on Spanish soil at the request of the United States Department of Justice. He is 65 years old. He is in a Spanish cell, and he will not be getting out. Brian's 2, Prison, Barcelona. For 8 months, John McAfee occupies a concrete cell while lawyers on 2 continents argue about extradition. He is cut off from the instruments that defined his last decade. No yacht, no satellite uplink, no real-time audience, just walls, time, and whatever books Janice can get to him through the legal channels. He manages occasional statements through his legal team. One of them contains a sentence his followers read very carefully. "If I die in here, and it looks like a suicide, it wasn't." The reference to Jeffrey Epstein is unmade but unmistakable. He has a tattoo on his arm, a $sign, the letters WHACKD beneath it. He tells interviewers it's a warning he received about a plot against him. He insists, repeatedly and on the record, that he will not take his own life. June 23, 2021, 1 p.m. The Spanish National Court signs the extradition order. Within the hour, a court officer delivers the news to Brian's 2. Transfer to U.S. custody is imminent, possibly within days. John calls Janice. The conversation lasts several minutes. "I love you," he tells her. "I'll call you this evening." There is no evening call. At approximately 7 p.m., guards conducting a routine cell check find John McAfee unresponsive. A bedsheet, the structural bar above him. Paramedics arrive within minutes. At 7:23 p.m., he is pronounced dead. Official cause, suicide by hanging. Age 75, caught at last, never tried. Janice McAfee gives a statement saying her husband was not suicidal, that their final conversation was calm, even optimistic, that the timing, a matter of hours between the extradition signing and his death, is not a coincidence she is willing to accept as one. Spanish authorities conduct an autopsy. Toxicology returns clean. Cause of death confirmed. Asphyxiation consistent with hanging. The investigation closes. The internet does not close. His followers begin cataloging inconsistencies. His documented insistence that he would never take his own life. The Epstein references that now read as either prescient or planted. The files he claimed to possess. The powerful people he claimed to have evidence against. The timing. The counter-argument is quieter and perhaps more honest. John McAfee was 75 years old. He was facing a trial he knew he would lose and a sentence he would not survive. He had spent his entire adult life in motion, in opposition, in performance. And he was now in a concrete room with nothing to operate against. The man who said it was better to live one day as a lion than 1,000 years as a lamb had been in a cage for 8 months. Perhaps the final exit was the only one left that was still on his own terms. What's certain is this. He built something from 12 lines of code and a gift for psychological manipulation that protected computers on every continent. He took $100 million and burned it on the specific project of becoming ungovernable. He evaded the resources of multiple nation-states for years, using nothing but movement, cash, performance, and the understanding that fame and fugitive status, combined correctly, create a paradoxical cover that conventional law enforcement isn't built to penetrate. He poisoned his own mind with the same paranoia that made him brilliant. He left a man dead on a beach in Belize, whose family never got a trial. He spent his final years in a performance of defiance that was real and theatrical at the same time, and nobody, possibly including John himself, could tell which parts were which. His name is still on the software. You probably have a device somewhere that carries it, protecting against exactly the threats he described in apocalyptic terms to terrified IT managers in 1989. He walked away from that company 30 years before he died. The name stayed. That's the thing about building something from fear. Fear has a longer half-life than most things. Long after the builder is gone, the structure keeps standing. And somewhere right now, a government is dealing with a privacy tool, an encrypted network, something John McAfee pointed at and said, "This is the future." 3 years before anyone else saw it. The files he claimed to have, the hard drives, the evidence against governments he said would surface if anything happened to him. 3 years after his death, nothing has surfaced. Nothing has been confirmed. Nothing has been ruled out either. Maybe he was bluffing. Maybe the bluff was the point. Maybe somewhere, in a server room in a country that doesn't extradite, a timer is running on something John McAfee set in motion years before he died in Barcelona. Or maybe the most brilliant thing he ever did was make you believe that was possible. Either way, the antivirus is still running, and the man who wrote it is still, in some fundamental way, loose. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what comes next, and turn on notifications so you're always the first to know, because the next story might be even crazier.